is that it's going to be more question and answer based, and we're also going to be going over some of these. So the list of topics, right? So you can find this on Canvas under pages, view all pages, exams, and there should be a list of topics for final exam. And so all these ones up here, so chapters 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, these are the ones that we've covered since the last exam. It's what the mock exam is mostly focused on. I'm assuming about 2/3 of the final exam will be on that. And the rest of it will be basic questions on the concepts of chapters 3, 6, and 4. So supply, demand, equilibrium, elasticity, and then not public goods, market externalities, and market failures. So to get started, do you guys have any questions that you want us to cover, any concepts that you're really struggling with, anything that you're not comfortable with that you'd like us to hit real quick? Or, what was that? Game theory. Okay, let's do it. So let's go to game theory. So we're going to use the example on the mock exam, if that's all right. So if everybody wants to pull that up, it's towards the end. So it's number 26 on the mock exam for those of you watching the video. So I'm just going to draw this up on the board real quick. Draw it like that.
Should be diagonal.
The other way? Okay. Fair enough.
Just consistency, right?
Yeah. Off to a good start.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yes. Okay. So that should be 5, 7, 45, 285, and then 275. Okay, so then this is don't renew. This is new. This is impose. And this is okay. So the introduction to it, let's have somebody read it. Don't pay way too close attention to it because sometimes I think it will kind of throw you off. But does somebody want to read the intro to this question under table 2? Can somebody read it out loud for me? Go for it.
Each year, the United States considered renewal of most favored nation trading status with China. Historically, legislators have made threats of not renewing MFN status because of human rights abuses in China. The non-renewal of MFN trading status is likely to involve some retaliatory measures by China. The payout table below shows the potential economic gains associated with the game in which China may impose trade sanctions against U.S. firms and the United States may not renew MFN status with China. The table contains the dollar value of all trade flow benefits to the United States and China.
Okay. So now that we've read it, pretty much all you really need to pull from that is, okay, so you've got a pretty basic game. Each party has 2 options, right? And then here are the anticipated results. So let's go to number 26. Pursuing its own best interest, China will impose trade sanctions against U.S. firms. So what is this question looking for? Yeah.
Is when China's consistently making the most money.
Right. We're looking for China's dominant strategy, or if China does have a dominant strategy. So how would you figure out if China has a dominant strategy?
kind of look at it, right?
Yeah, okay. But unpack that for me. What do you mean by just look at it?
Well, basically, you look at China's two options. You got impose or you don't impose, and you basically look at the two numbers that correspond with each and see which ones are higher, and then you stick with that option.
Right. So, pretty much what you're looking at is you're saying, all right, if I'm China and I don't know what the U.S. is going to be doing, then is there one strategy that is better for me regardless of what the U.S. does, right? So if I'm China and I impose trade sanctions, right, and the U.S. doesn't renew, then I'm going to make 75. But if I don't impose, I'm going to make 5. Does that make sense? Then down here, if I'm China and I impose trade sanctions, I'm going to make 285, and if I don't, they're going to make 275 if they choose this option. So is there one option for China that is better either way? Impose, right? So then what would be our dominant strategy? Boom, got it. Sweet. All right, so now let's answer this question. So pursuing its own best interest, China will impose trade sanctions against the U.S. firms. What? So A is what? Only if the U.S. doesn't renew. B, only if the U.S. renews. C, regardless of whether the U.S. renews. Or D, none of the above is correct. China will not impose trade sanctions. What's the right one? C, right? Because no matter what the U.S. does, China knows that it's better for itself to impose trade sanctions.
Is the dominant one just always the one where they make the most money?
Yeah. So, and you might not have a dominant strategy in that. So if you were to look at this, right, and over here, let's say you flip these two numbers, this was a 5 and this was a 75, then depending on the other player's strategy, you don't have one strategy that's always going to be the best regardless of what they do. In this case, they do. So, but yeah, it's the strategy that no matter what the other player does, it's going to be better for you. So that's your dominant strategy. Okay? All right, so let's go to 27. Okay, so pursuing its own best interest, the U.S. will renew MFN status with China. So let's figure out what's the U.S.'s dominant strategy. Try and do this one on your own. Okay? Does the U.S. have a dominant strategy?
Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah.
Right. So then what is the answer to our question? Let's read through the answers. So only if China does not impose, only if China imposes, regardless of whether China imposes, or in no case.
No case.
Right. In no case. Does that make sense? Is anybody lost on game theory on this so far? Are we okay? Okay. Any questions? What was that? You don't get it? Okay. What is there anything in particular, or it's just kind of losing you? Okay. So something that helps me with game theory is you just put yourself in the mind of one of the players of this game, okay? So think of yourself for the first in this question as a representative of the US, all right? So you're looking for your dominant strategy. What is the strategy that for you will always end up best, okay? So looking at this, you as the US, you have two options, right? You don't know what China's going to do. You can't force them to do anything, so you're saying, all right, let's take a look at this and let's see what would be better for us, regardless of what happens, right? So if they impose and we don't renew, we'll make 65 billion, I think it is, right? If they impose and we do renew, we'll make 35. So if they impose, then we should renew. We should not renew, right? Does that make sense? If I'm the US. And so then we look over here and we say, okay, well, if they don't impose and we don't renew, we'll make 140. And if they don't impose and we renew, we'll make 130. So then this should be our option, right? Because that's better for us. So in both cases, it's better for us not to renew MFN status. Does that make sense? So because in both cases, depending on what they choose, it's better for us not to renew, this is called our dominant strategy. Does that make sense? So this is the strategy that it's best for us, regardless of what the other person does, or the other party does. Does that make sense? Does that help a little bit?
And because both dominant strategies overlap, is that what makes them equilibrium?
Yeah. And it's not always...
They don't have to be dominant strategies to be national equilibrium as long as they overlap.
So yeah, so it could not make them their most money, but it could be their.
Right.
Yeah, so what's the national equilibrium here?
Yeah, let's do that real quick. How do you guys remember kind of like the little way that we did national equilibrium before?
Circling.
Yeah, the circling way. It's my favorite way. It's easy. Do you want to do it, Tanner? Or you just?
Yeah,
sorry,
I'll do it.
I don't want to like make you move and stuff, but
Gotta be something.
Tanner's taking like Tanner's taking whole classes on game theory, so I'll let him. He's more expert in this than I am.
So it pretty much just comes down to you pick one player, pick the USA first, and we'll just fix their choice. We'll assume that they chose to not renew. So then which is China's best option, 75 or is it 5? 75, right? Circle there. So now when it's renew, if they choose to renew, should they get 285 or 275?
285.
285, right? Now we'll do the same thing for China. So we'll fix impose as their choice. So now does the US want 65 or 35?
65.
Want 65. And then if they don't impose, they want 140 or 130? 140. I want 140. So that's where you can see that they'll always choose this, because that's regardless of their choice. That'd be their dominant strategy. And then the US will always choose to not renew because it's their dominant strategy. And since they overlap, that's the national equilibrium where they both overlap. Does that make sense?
See. So just fix one thing at a time, right? Pretend you're one of the players and then fix the other option and say, all right, what would be best for me if that happened? Circle it. Go to the other one, what would be best for me if that happened? Circle it. And then switch roles and do it again. And in any box where you've got two circles, that's a national equilibrium. Okay? Everybody okay with that? You guys cool? Awesome. Okay. So then let's do 28. So if both countries follow a dominant strategy, the value of trade flow benefits for China will be what? 75, right? How do you figure that out?
Looking at it.
Yeah, just look at the box with the national equilibrium, right? With the two dominant strategies, and that's the number for China. Okay? And then we might as well just do 29 too. Assume the trade negotiators meet to discuss trade policy between the United States and China. If neither party to the negotiation is able to trust the other party, then what would be the right answer to that one? Read through them. D, right? They should both follow their dominant strategy. Okay. Any other questions on that? Are you guys okay? All right, let's move on. Other concepts, other things that y'all might need help with, y'all want to go over.
I kind of just want to go over the old stuff because I feel like
The old stuff.
I don't know what I'm going to be seeing.
Okay, let's go over the old stuff. Okay. Let's pull up mock exam 1. So we'll just kind of go in order of these list of topics. So we'll go first, demand, supply, market equilibrium. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. So something I want to emphasize for you guys is with these topics, you're not going to need to know them in as great of detail as you did for the first two exams, but just know the general ideas behind them, right? So supply, demand, the shifters, what makes them move, determinants of demand, determinants of supply, what equilibrium is. It shouldn't be way too hard, but let's go over a few examples. So number 16 for those of you following online, this is on the first mock exam, so for mock exam for the first test. So number 16, refer to figure 2. The shift from D to D1 is called what?
Is that a decrease in demand?
Yeah, right? And what would it be called? So on this graph, right, we've got demand curve, and you've got D1. Okay? So that would be a decrease in demand, right? What would it be called if we were moving from a point D0 to a point D1? What would that be called?
Increase in money demand. Or
or
decrease.
a decrease in quantity demanded, right? Does that make sense as to, do you guys remember why, or do you want me to refresh on that real quick? Refresh, okay. So, what is this axis up here, what does the y-axis always represent? Price, good job. And what about this one? Quantity, good job. So, when we see this right here, we can draw this line down and we can see, all right, this would be our quantity 2. Okay, so we can pretend that's 100 units. And then as we move this way on the graph, right, if we move to the left, we're going to be getting closer and closer to 0 in quantity, right? So we don't know what this number is, but we could say it's maybe that Q1 is like 75, right? So as you can see, as you moved along this demand curve, what has happened? You've had a decrease in quantity demanded, right? And a decrease in quantity, so changes in quantity, are always have to do with what changing? Yes. Also, what is the thing that is always changing? Oh, really good. So, a decrease in quantity demanded or supplied always has to do with a change in price, okay? So a change in quantity, demanded or supplied, is always caused by a change in price. Okay? And that's the same thing on the supply curve, right? So if you were to see a movement from here to here, like, so let's say this is S1, this is S2, what would that be called? Increase in quantity supplied. And what would cause that?
Change in price.
Change in price. Change in price, right? And that's the change in price of the good, right? Change in price of whatever this good is that's being sold. Okay? And then,
So let's touch on the demand curve. So as it moves up, so from point D0 to D1, that's a decrease, you said, in quantity demanded?
yeah, it's a decrease, right? And the way you can figure that out is just come down here to the quantity axis, right?
Okay.
And then see, okay, if we're moving from here to here, are we getting, because this is 0, right?
Yeah.
Are we getting closer to 0 or further away? So is it increasing or decreasing? So on this graph, the further you go left, you're always going to be decreasing in quantity.
I know, thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Does everyone remember that question on the first exam where it was like, when is there a surplus and a bunch of people got it wrong?
No.
Because everybody answered when supply exceeds demand. Ring any bells?
I think,
Yeah.
I think so.
Does everybody understand why that was wrong? Because supply and demand are the entire curves. It doesn't really make sense to compare the entire curves. If it said quantity supplied exceeds quantity demanded, then it would be correct. But it's not just comparing the entire curves.
Say the question again. What was how was it phrased?
It was like a surplus exists when, and the choice that a bunch of people answered was supply exceeds demand, and that was wrong. Do you understand why?
Yeah.
So the right answer was quantity.
Quantity supplied
exceeds
exceeds
demand.
quantity.
Okay, so quantity was key.
Yeah. Does that make sense to everybody, or is somebody like, what the freak just happened? You guys good?
Why do they have to trick us like that?
It's, I don't know, it's their job. Got nothing better to do. Okay, so just to kind of drill this over, because I'm pretty sure you'll probably see something like this on your exam. What would this be called? A move from S0 to S1.
An increase in supply.
Increase in supply. Okay, real quick. Let me find where I wrote these down, because I don't memorize anymore. But what are the determinants of demand and determinants of supply? So these are the things that cause the demand curve and the supply curve to shift. Okay? I'm going to write these down. I would recommend you guys do too.
Isn't demand buyers, right? Isn't number of buyers one of them?
That is one of them.
Consumer preference.
Yep. And buyers. Number of buyers. Somebody said another one. What was it?
Buyer preference.
Yeah. So that's consumer preferences. Preference. Another one.
Price of goods.
Price of related goods. Okay, so this one I want to spend a little time on. Price of related goods, okay? So remember we were talking about movements along one of the curves, right? Whenever you see a movement along a curve, that has to do with the price of the good. Okay, so if we're talking about, let's say, we're talking about hamburgers, we're saying that hamburgers, they went up in price, okay? But if we're talking about something that would shift the curve, the demand curve, then that would be like hot dogs are going down in price, right? So all of a sudden, the demand for hamburgers are less because hot dogs are cheaper. So if it's a related good, not the good you're necessarily talking about on the graph, that will shift the curve. If it's the actual good, it's always a movement along the line. Okay? Got it? People get hung up on that one. Okay, and then last one for demand is income. So write those down, and then we'll go over here to. Did everybody get this? You guys good? Yeah.
So in a question, if we see the word shift, we know that that's going to have to do with price, you said?
So if you see a movement along one of the curves,
Uh-huh.
then that has to do with the price of the good in question, right? The good that's being represented, the market for the good that's being represented by the graph. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But if you see something that's like a related good, so things that can be substituted out or things that are complements, right? So example, what are examples of substitute goods, things that can be substituted for one another?
Coffee.
What was that?
Like coffee.
Coffee and tea, right?
Yeah.
So like coffee and tea, if the price for tea goes way up, then more people are just going to buy coffee, right? So changes in the price of tea can actually affect the demand for coffee. And then what about?
So would that shift tea?
Yeah,
And,
yeah, it
and,
would.
and coffee as well, right?
Well, so it's actually funny because so if price were to go up in like the tea market or something, right, then that would be a movement along the line to the tea market, but then it could cause a shift in the coffee market.
Okay, so
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So the shift is the opposite of the price change.
So the shift occurs in the market of the good. So if the price changes, right, then the shift occurs in the market of the related good, not in the, of the good in question.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Right.
How likely do you think it is that we'll see one of these things right here?
I bet pretty likely.
I would, yeah. Everything we're throwing up here, it's because we're kind of putting money on the fact that there are probably something like this.
Are we gonna need to know any formulas from the earlier chapters, or will it just be mostly concepts?
I would know how to do like elasticity.
Yeah, it'll be mostly concepts, but I actually distinctly remember the TAs when I was taking this class told me that I wouldn't use another formula for elasticity, and it was on the test. So I'm not going to make that mistake again. We'll go over that here in just a minute.
So, to touch back on what we were just talking about, so as it moves up and down the curve, that means the change of the actual price of that good is changing, right?
Right.
So say like when the T does go up, we'll move up on that, and then we'll
Right.
yes.
Right. It'll be a movement along that curve, right? So it'll move from this point to this point, or if you're talking about supply, right? From that point to that point.
And so then like when a price related good gets involved, that's when it actually shifts from left to right depending on the impact it has.
Right. Exactly. Because
Okay.
that's one of these. So these determinants, which I spelled horribly, but I'm not going to fix it because I'm lazy. These can also be thought of as like the things that shift, or shifters, okay? So these are the things that will shift the demand and the supply curve. So let's see if you guys remember any of the determinants of supply, all right?
Number of sellers.
Number of sellers, that is one of them.
Is technology one of them?
Yes, it is.
Was the economy one of them? Like how much money there is in the marketplace?
No,
Oh,
that's a good thought. But what you might be thinking of is like the taxes and subsidies.
Oh, okay.
Kind of the way that the government is treating that market. Some bullets here. these. Price of related goods is 1 for both. Producer expectations. Okay. So I would jot those down somewhere. And then let me see if we can find some other examples. Okay, so let's do 15 real quick because we just talked about it. So 15, a movement along the supply curve might be caused by a change in what? So let's read through the answers, right? A movement along the supply curve might be caused by a change in technology, input prices, expectations about future prices, or the price of the good or service that is being supplied.
D.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, good job, guys. Okay. Scroll down. All right, 14. Suppose the American Medical Association announces that men who shave their heads are less likely to die of heart failure. We could expect that the current demand for hair gel to increase, razors to increase, combs to increase, or none of the above. Razors, right? What would be changing that? What would be making that demand go up? Which one of these determines would that be?
Consumer preference.
Consumer preference. Good job.
Thanks.
Okay. Okay. Is this real? Okay. Let's do. Probably won't need to know that price ceilings, I would imagine.
I think we can also go over elasticity formula.
We'll go over elasticity real quick. Okay, so who remembers what elasticity measures?
How much demand will change depending on price.
Right. And more generally, that's a correct definition for price elasticity of demand. But more generally, all elasticity is a measure of how reactive one variable is to a change in another variable, right? So in most cases that we look at here in economics, we are looking at how much does demand react to a change in price. Does that make sense? Everybody got these? Good? Okay. So we're looking at the price elasticity of demand. I have a problem because my P's look like D's. So this is a P, so that you guys know. What, does anybody remember this formula by chance, just to impress me?
Change in price over time.
I think I heard it from like 2 people at the same time, but I think you got it right. So it's your percentage change in price, right? Over your percentage change in quantity demanded. Okay?
Does everyone remember the midpoint method formula?
Midpoint method. Okay, we'll do a midpoint method example. But, so when you look at this, right, where a lot of people go wrong is that if you were to, so let's do an example. Do we have one here?
Brandon,
Point A and B.
I
Yeah.
thought it was quantity over price.
Is it?
Oh
yeah, it is. Sorry.
Good catch.
That was a very good catch. My bad.
Well, did you write the thing on the left wrong?
No, that's right.
Oh, that's right.
Okay, so let's look at number 19. So this is still mock exam 1. So the price elasticity of demand between point A and B using the midpoint method. Okay, so let's look at this. So first of all, at point A, what is our price and what is our quantity?
Point A, we got price of $18.
Demanded is 100. Okay, what about point B?
Price is 12.
this, what a lot of people will be tempted to do is they'll just take the change, right, between these two and the change between these two and divide them out. But that's not right. Why is that not right?
You're gonna
That's not the percentage.
Right, it's not the percentage change. So then how do we figure out the percentage change of each?
change over average.
Right, right. So let's do quantity first, all right? So up here, we've got the change, right? Our total change, which would be 300 minus 100, right? So then that's just our total change. How do we make it the average again? Or how do we make it the percentage change?
Over the average, so
Right.
the 2 divided by 2.
Right. So the average between these two numbers, right? Which would be 200. So that would end up being 1. But then we would put that over, and now we got to do it with the price, okay? So what's our net change here?
6.
Right. 18 minus 12. And then what would we divide that by?
15.
Did we lose anybody here? Does everybody get that so far? Raise your hand if you're...
Should I know where the 15 comes from?
Yeah. So the 15 is just, you just take the average between these two numbers, right? So...
So 18 plus 12 divided by 2.
Right. So the other way that you can write this out, that I don't know if this will be helpful for everyone, but you can also do, like, if you're looking for that, you could also write it like this, right? Where you're going 300 minus 100 up here. And then you could also do, instead of that, you could do 100 plus 300, and then like 1/2. Does that make sense? So that just means that you're taking the average of these two numbers, right? You could also do that divided by 2, but it doesn't really matter. So you just find, up here we just found the average just by looking at it and figuring out point halfway in between. So then, does somebody want to plug this into a calculator for me?
It's 2.5. 2 delta.
2.5, so the answer is D. Is everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Okay,
Wait, that's the midpoint method.
that's the midpoint method.
Oh.
Not too bad, right? It's okay.
Is that just the same thing as like the elasticity? Like,
Yeah. So that would be your elasticity formula. What you also might see is you might see a simpler question where you actually don't have to use the midpoint method. What would be an example of a question where you don't have to use the midpoint method? Okay, I'm trying to lead you on too much, I'm sorry.
if it's elastic.
That was not fair. So what you might see is you might see something along the lines of, all right, when price went up 5%, quantity demanded went down 2%. What would be the price elasticity of demand in this market?
5 over 2.
Right.
2 over 5.
Yeah, 2 over 5.
Oh, 2 over 5.
But does that make sense as to why you don't have to do the midpoint method?
It's already done.
It's already in percentages, right? It's already told you, all right, price is going up 5%, quantity demanded is going down 2%. So then you just have to plug it into the formula. Just percentage change in price, or percentage change in quantity demanded over percentage change in price.
Does everyone remember the revenue test also? There might be a question about that.
If price, if revenue goes up,
Is that
the price goes down, then it's elastic.
So if they move in the same direction, if price goes up and revenue goes up, that would be inelastic, right? And then if they move in opposite directions, the price goes up but revenue goes down, that's elastic.
Do you guys want to go over that in a little more detail?
Yeah, what's moving?
Okay. So, let's talk about it.
That makes sense.
So, revenue test. So let's do a couple of thought experiments with the revenue test. So let's think about a couple of markets. Okay, think about the market for. Gosh, I always blank when I try to come up with examples on the fly. But let's think about the market for oranges. All right, if the price of oranges were to get jacked up to $100 per orange, how much money do you think the orange companies would be making? Not that much, right? Nobody likes oranges that much. I mean, maybe you get some super bougie people who just like oranges. But what that tells you, right, is that as price is going up, then if your revenue is going down, it means that the demand for that good is elastic, right? It's responding a lot to that change in price. Does that make sense? So if price is going up and revenue is going down, then you know that the demand is elastic. Okay? And the opposite is also true, right? So if price were to go down a ton, right, and orange is also going to cost 25 cents, and revenue starts going up, then it also means it's elastic, right? The demand is still responding to that change in price. Same thing. Okay, so now let's talk about something else, right? So when these two are moving in opposite directions, right, you know that demand is elastic. So now let's talk about EpiPens, right? If the price of EpiPens goes up, are the amount of people who are going to use EpiPens, is that going to change? No, right? They can't. So if price is going up, what do you expect to happen to revenue with EpiPens?
It goes up as well.
Yeah, it also goes up. Which means that demand is what?
Inelastic.
Inelastic. And same thing, if price goes down, EpiPens are suddenly really cheap. Is demand what's gonna happen to revenue?
It's going to go down.
It's gonna go down, right? There's not gonna be a bunch of people who are just randomly buying EpiPens for no reason. So that's the revenue test, okay? So you just know if price and revenue move in opposite directions, demand is elastic. If they move in the same direction, demand is inelastic. Any questions on that?
Yeah. Remember how that looked on a graph.
Yeah, totally. So this would be like a practice example, okay? So let's say you've got this demand curve and this demand curve. Okay, which of these two is more elastic and which is more inelastic?
Left is more elastic
Okay, how do you know that?
because it's more like straight. I don't know. I just know in my head like when it's like flat, then it's elastic. When it's straight up and down, then it's more inelastic.
Right,
That's how I do it.
right. So, I mean, I've taught my stupid memory trick like 5 or 6 times, but I'll do it again. So my trick, right, is that when you look at the graph, if the line looks like that and it looks more like an E, wow. Guys, I've been up since 5. Elastic, right? And if it looks more like an I, right, then inelastic. But there's also the nerdy way we could do it, the more graphical way. And the idea is just, all right, so if you fix a price point here and a price point here, right? And you come over here and you compare the quantities on these curves, and then you were to take that same change over here, right? And compare the changes in quantities, you can see over here, with this same change in price, quantity is changing a lot more over here, right? So it's responding a lot more to that change in price. Whereas over here, it's not really responding that much. So you can tell that this one's more inelastic because it's not bouncing, right? It's not responding to that change where this one is. Or you can just do this. Does that make sense to everybody? Would you be okay seeing those? Okay, cool. And it can also be with supply too. Oh, and with midpoint method, if you guys see one that says price elasticity of supply, don't freak out. It's the same formula, just sub in supply for demand. Okay? So if you see price elasticity of supply, stay calm. You know how to do it. Do it exactly the same way you would do with demand, just sub in the different numbers, okay? Okay. Any other questions on this so far? You guys are all right? Okay. So let's go back to this list of topics. Demand, supply, market equilibrium. Let's mark exam 1. Do you think we should go over price ceilings and price floors? Do you think it's worth it? I don't know if that would be on the exam, but
I mean, I just briefly say like if there's a price ceiling below, then you're gonna have a shortage. If there's a price floor above the equilibrium, then you'll have a surplus.
is everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
You guys,
Going back to the whole binding, non-binding idea. But
yeah. You guys okay with price ceilings, price floors?
Stone
Okay.
Gucci.
Okay, cool. So let's go exam 2. Let's see what we've got on this one for us. We'll do some externality stuff. Okay, let's do number 8. So this is mock exam 2. So we'll talk about this tax wedge real quick, just in case you see something like this. Okay, so on figure 2, so the answer is, so the question is, as a result of the tax, what is happening? And we've got a graph that looks like this, and you've got this nice little tax wedge in here. Okay? Okay. So the question is, as a result of the tax, it's asking you for what are buyers effectively paying, what are sellers effectively receiving, right? So if there was no tax in this market, what would buyers be paying? $12, right?
that would also be what producers are receiving, right?
Everybody follow that? Okay. But now that this tax is imposed, what are buyers effectively paying?
16.
Good job. What are sellers effectively receiving? Nice. Nice. You guys still got this one. Okay. And then if this tax is imposed, what area would represent the deadweight loss?
The little triangle.
Right. This little triangle. Okay. Well, you guys retained that one pretty well. Any questions on that one? You're okay?
Okay, so we were saying on this question right here that the buyers would effectively pay 16 for something normally that they would pay 12 for.
Yeah. Right. Because once this tax is imposed, it drives this wedge in here. So you're going to be paying $16 for it, but $8 is going to be what the sellers effectively receive. So what quantity per unit does this tax charge?
Can you say what?
What quantity per unit does this tax charge? What's how? Why? 8. 8, right?
16 minus 8.
Exactly. You just look at how much, because
So do we have to find the area of a tax wedge? Or
I don't know. So I haven't seen the final. We're doing the best we can with the information we have, but because typically what we would do with the first couple exams.
I mean, it's simple though. 1/2 base times height, right, for the deadweight loss and stuff. So
Yeah.
I mean, you guys can do that.
the taxes?
You guys okay with that?
Yeah.
And then what I was saying here is if you're ever looking to see how much a tax is, you just look at, all right, what is the price that the buyers are paying versus the price that the sellers are receiving, because that's obviously how much the government is taking out, right? Okay? You guys all right? Yeah.
I know something I struggled with. It was incidence of tax. Could we go over that?
Tax incidence?
Yeah.
Sure, totally. Let's see if we can find an example in here. Yeah, here we go. So on this one we've got 3 different graphs. I'll do them real quick. One. notes out because otherwise people on the video will have no idea what the freak is going on. I don't even know if anybody watches the videos. God.
Yeah, monetize the videos. That's what makes money.
Yeah. Hopefully. Okay. So
6 cents.
and this question is saying, all right, in which market will the majority of the tax fall on the buyer? So how do we determine where a tax will fall?
You can't determine which one's more inelastic.
Right. And so a visual way to do that is just by, you come right here and you kind of cut this across, and you can pick 2 points. Sorry, these are probably not super obvious. Probably should, I'm going to make these a little more different. You can just come across here and kind of cut it. And then you can see, all right, which side of the market is getting hit harder by this tax, right? And if you're looking at which side of the market, you just look at which curve it's touching, right? Whether it's consumers will be with the demand curve, producers will be with the supply curve. So who's getting hit harder on this one? Right. So sellers, right? Let's look at the size of that area. All right, now let's come over here. Same thing. Who's getting hit harder now? Buyers, right? Because demand curve, that area is bigger. And then this one is kind of hard to tell, right? Because they're pretty equally. But the idea behind it is that the more inelastic side of the market bears the majority of the tax incidence. Okay? The more inelastic side of the market bears the majority of the tax incidence. Why is that? Why does that make sense?
Well, for buyers, they could just go somewhere else if it's more elastic and they don't want to pay the taxes.
Right. So elasticity measures how well something responds to a change in price, right? Taxes change prices. So if one side of the market can't really respond to that change in price, they're going to bear the majority of that burden. And if you forget that, maybe just draw these out. Draw like a super inelastic demand curve and a super elastic supply curve, and then you'll just be able to kind of figure that out visually. Does that make sense? Okay. Any heartburn on that? Tax incidence, you guys are all right?
And then for the seller, it would be graph A.
Yeah. So it'd be this one. Okay. Any other questions on that? Let's see.
Is that externalities?
So yeah, this would be market failures and externalities. We're going to do some externality ones now. So let's look at 18. So 18 looks like this. How did I have 2 erasers in it? Okay. So 18 we've got dx. So, got this one. And it says, as the figure is drawn, who sends tax payments to the government? In this one. I actually don't think this one's going to be particularly important, so I'll just tell you. Whichever curve shifts, that's who's sending the buyer. I didn't read the question before I drew the freaking graph, and I was like, that's honestly, I seriously doubt that's on the final. But if it is, you're welcome.
Okay, so
It's a bonus question.
So
Bonus question. Yeah. Yeah, whichever curve is shifting, if you see a graph and it says who's sending in the tax in this market,
that was just buyers.
yeah, just buyers. Might as well do 19 since we went through all that trouble. So after the tax, the effective price that buyers pay is what?
Was that $8?
$8. Okay. So now we'll move on to figure 5. We're still on mock exam 2. Okay. So this is an externality question. Sorry, guys. Okay. So, number 20. Which quantity represents the social optimum for this market? We got supply, social value, demand, and our social value.
Would be Q30.
Look. Yes. Can you explain to me why that is?
Because with the positive social value intercepts on the supply curve, so it's like where the equilibrium point is at,
Right. So normally our equilibrium is here, right? Well, that is where our equilibrium is. But when we have a curve that represents the social value or the social cost, that's the curve when we're looking for our optimal quantity, right? Because externalities are something that is reflected outside of the market transaction, that either there's additional benefit that could be had, or there's cost that's being incurred by something outside of the transaction. Does that make sense? So if you were to see a curve like this, right, so this is our social benefit or value, then the optimal quantity is not going to be where supply meets demand, but where supply meets this, okay? What would this be an example of? Would this be, do you guys remember the two different types of externalities? Positive and negative, right? Which one is this? Positive. How do you know it's positive?
Social benefit.
Yeah. Super good. So positive externalities will always have to do with social benefit and social value. What else will they always have to do with?
A shift in demand.
Perfect. Good job. So positive externalities, like some of the keywords you're going to want to look for, social value, or benefit. And if the demand curve is the one that's in question. Okay? So if you see those two, then you'll know you're dealing with a positive externality. That'd be something that probably would be good to know. Additionally, how would you, so let's say that we have this situation. How would we get our market to get up to this line of social benefit? What would be something the government could do?
Subsidies.
Subsidies. That's another word to look at. Subsidies. Subsidies. So positive externalities, those are good words to know. Know that it has to do with the demand curve. You guys good? Okay. So what would a negative externality look like? Right. So then what would this up here be called, this curve, this new one?
Social costs.
Social cost. Nice. So negative externalities. You're always, keywords are social cost. They always have to do with what side of the market? Supply. Good job. And how do you correct a negative externality? How would the government correct a negative externality? Taxes. Taxes. Good job. Kenna, do you want to go over the deadweight losses for both of these? Sure. Yeah, Marcus, sorry. Gotta get you up out of the chair at least once or twice.
Get some blood flow, that's good.
Yeah.
For a negative externality, where's the deadweight loss zone?
Up there.
Oh, right there?
Yeah.
On the triangle, below the
Pointing to the right.
Pointing to the right. Is
So-
it?
So go to the equilibrium and draw a line down.
Which equilibrium?
The upper one, social cost.
Is it?
Oh, that's right.
It's always from the original equilibrium, then you draw the new curve. That was where everybody got that question wrong on test 2, because that was the triangle he gave us. But that's not the deadweight loss for a negative externality.
Oh,
Alright, so now we're here for a positive externality. Where's the deadweight loss? Original.
Wait, is it a loss or is it benefit?
It's still considered a deadweight loss because we want it to happen, but it's not.
Oh, that's right.
Makes sense?
So ideally, society would want it to be producing here, but it's producing here, right? That make sense?
I see.
Okay. Any other questions on externalities? Any other things that are freaking you out? You okay? Okay. Good. Sweet. So I would write these down if you haven't already. These little lists and maybe these graphs. Let's go back to our concept list. Yeah.
So in exam 2, should we know the things that the like 28 to 30?
28 to 30. Let's see.
They're public goods, but the last one's public and private goods.
So on the list, where did that go? So he said no need to cite the public goods section. So as you can see up here, so I'm not just blowing smoke at you.
Yeah.
So yeah, no need to cite the public goods section. That's from Andre. So if there is public goods on it, go after him.
I don't want to go after.
He probably knows jujitsu. He's from Brazil. I don't know, but that might be racist. But it's probably racist. Okay. So does everybody feel good about these concepts over here, kind of the original ones from the first 2 exams? Is there anything else from the second part, from the mock exam, from these concepts up top, that you guys are kind of shaky on, you want us to go over 1 or 2 more times? Absolutely anything. From here on out, from here for the balance of the class, this is just your time. We've covered everything that we need to cover.
Well, we want to know the circular flow diagram.
I don't think so, because that was, I think, chapter 2, and he doesn't have that listed up here either. It just says demand, supply, market equilibrium. I mean, it doesn't hurt, but I don't remember that being on the final when I took it. So I think you'll be okay without that. Any other questions?
What about when they have like a chart with lots of like average fixed costs, average variable costs, all that kind of stuff in there, and they said find the profit maximizing for
Okay, yeah.
Is that what that work?
Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so what you're saying is like when you have a chart and you need to figure out the profit maximizing output.
Yeah, it's not necessarily a graph. It's
okay, let's do that. You know what? I'm gonna actually pull it up because I feel like I always make up charts even they end up not working. Yeah. Pull this one up because it has the chart. It's done. Okay. So this one So are you saying that you just want to find the profit maximizing output, or do you want to go through the whole chart? The whole chart process? Okay. So if you were to get a chart like this, okay, and it was all filled out, okay, and then you also had a column for price that looked, let's just say that you had a column for price and a column for marginal revenue. What would you be looking for?
The highest number, marginal revenue.
You'd be looking for where what equals what? What's our profit maximizing rule? Right, where our marginal revenue meets our marginal cost, right? So you would be going to wherever this is, right? And if you saw 2 numbers that lined up, so if you had a marginal revenue that was 19, then that would be your approximate profit maximizing output, where those 2 match up, right? But what happens if you don't have 2 that match up exactly? What are you looking for? The closest one without cost going over revenue, right?
So if you have 20 marginal, the profit maximization will be 19.
Right. So if you had something that looked like this, okay, so this would be marginal cost, this would be marginal revenue. And so this is
Should be for this class though. It should just be the same because it's all just price, right?
yeah. Well, it depends on market model, but I was going to go over price in a minute. But just for a conceptual one, okay. So for this one, I'll give you outputs too. What would be our profit maximizing output? Did you say 3? Yeah, no, you're right. Why though?
Because marginal revenue is, marginal cost is closest to marginal revenue at 3, but it doesn't go over.
Exactly. So you're looking for the point where, like you said, marginal revenue is as close to marginal cost as possible because that's where our profits can be maximized. But if there's not an output where that happens, then you want to go where marginal revenue is as close to marginal cost as it can be without going over marginal cost.
Isn't it just as close at 4 though?
Yeah, the 4.
It's just as close, but what's different here?
Well, it's the same.
Yeah,
Oh.
still.
Sorry guys, I flipped those numbers. See, that's why I don't like to make up charts off the fly. That's what I meant to put. What's different now? Marginal cost exceeds marginal revenue. Right. Okay. And then what if you didn't have, let's assume that this is a perfectly competitive market, okay? And what if you don't have a column for marginal revenue? It just tells you it's a perfectly competitive market and it just gives you a price of 8. What would be our profit maximizing output?
Revenue. So 4. 3 revenue. So
Right. Should be 3. Does that make sense? Does that make sense why that is? Okay, so in a perfectly competitive market, our price is going to be equal to our marginal revenue, and which is also equal to our demand curve, okay? So in a perfectly competitive market, that's always going to be the case. Let's go down here. So in these examples here, it's saying this is a competitive market, right? This is down on the most recent mock exam, numbers 10, figure 1. So when you reach this point, pretty much what it's telling you is if it is a competitive market, you're not going to have a marginal revenue curve, nor are you going to have a demand curve. And the reason for that is that wherever that price is fixed, so whatever price it gives you, that price line, so if you go here, and that comes across, that is your demand curve, and it is also your marginal revenue curve. Does that make sense? So you use it for all 3. Does that make any sense at all?
At number 10, on number 10, it's P1 is your.
Right.
Because that tells you the version, right?
Right. So then, like for example, let's just do this for fun. We'll do number 10. Okay. So when market price is P1, a profit maximizing firm's total revenue can be represented by the area of what? So profit maximizing. How would we find our profit maximizing output? Marginal revenue equals marginal cost, right? That same rule would be going over and over again. So what is our marginal revenue curve in this case? P1, right? Because it's a competitive market. So price is equal to marginal revenue is equal to demand. All right, those are all the same line. Okay. So when you look at these, if you don't see a demand curve, you don't see a marginal revenue curve, check to make sure it's a perfectly competitive market. It will be, and just know that all 3 of those are the same line. All right. So now we go over here. What are we looking for? We're looking for where our marginal revenue curve, right, or this price equals marginal cost. So we're going to come over here, okay? So then what box represents our revenue?
P1 times Q2.
Yeah. Does that make sense? Okay. And any other questions on that? You guys all right? Yeah.
Wait, why is it Q2?
Okay, good question. So, this is our marginal cost curve, right? What's our profit maximization rule?
Where
You're fine. You're fine.
It's margin revenue, marginal cost.
Good. Good. So then, what on this curve represents our marginal revenue?
P1.
Yeah. Good job. So then, where do those two intersect?
Oh, okay. I was looking at the curve ABC. Like that, I just
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you're good now.
Yeah, I get it.
All right. Awesome. Other questions? Okay. Let's go down here, just real quick. I'm gonna have you guys just name off what these curves are. This is figure 2 for those of you in the video. All right. What is curve A?
Demand.
Demand. What is curve D?
Marginal revenue.
Curve D.
Oh, D. I think it's a D.
Average.
Average total cost.
Yeah. What is curve C?
Marginal cost.
And what is curve D?
Marginal revenue.
Job. Okay, so you guys should be able to label these. But that would be really helpful, okay? So just always know, these two, they're downsloping. The one that's above is going to be demand. This one's going to be marginal revenue. The U-shaped one is average total cost, and the one that's going up is marginal cost. Okay?
Is there an average variable cost on that one or not?
No, but if there was, it would be here below. It would be a U-shaped curve that's below average total cost. And why is that? Why would it be below our average total cost?
Because it's a fixed cost plus a variable cost.
Exactly, because it's a component of average total cost, right? Fixed cost plus that variable cost will equal that total cost.
What was curve B?
Curve B. What? Help them out. What's curve B? Marginal revenue. Yeah. So marginal revenue and demand always look the same, but demand is going to be bigger.
And then what was curve D again?
Curve B is your average total cost. Okay. If you only see one U-shaped curve on the exam, it's going to be total cost. Okay. Any other questions? You guys feeling okay? All right. If there's no other questions, you guys are free to go. If any of you guys want to stay after, we've got like 15 extra minutes. We could spend some one-on-one time with you. Aside from that, good luck, you guys. We really hope that this has been helpful. I'm sure you'll do great. And if not, the class is curved, so if you all solve it, don't stress.
It's Thursday at 11 to 12:50 in the same classroom.
So,
11 to 12:50. Bring a photo ID, please.
yeah.